Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the land your great-grandfather fought for, worked for, and passed down through generations is no longer yours. Not because you sold it, not because you lost it in debt, but because someone, somewhere, decided you didn't deserve it anymore. That's exactly what happened to Elijah Carter, a man whose roots ran deeper than the oaks on the 1,500 acres of Georgia farmland his family had owned for over a century. Elijah's great-grandfather, Isaiah Carter, was born into bondage. When emancipation came, he didn't just walk away from the plantation, he walked toward a dream. With nothing but calloused hands and a burning will, Isaiah cut timber, worked other men's farms, and saved every penny until he could buy his land. Over the years, those acres became more than soil. They were a living testament to survival, dignity, and self-determination. A place where the Carter family built homes, raised livestock, planted corn and cotton, and told stories by the firelight that kept their history alive. But history has a way of attracting those who wish to erase it. Elijah always knew that his family's land was valuable, not just in dollars, but in meaning. Developers had tried for years to acquire it. Offers came in envelopes. Then came friendly visitors with fake smiles and empty promises. Elijah refused every time. "This land isn't for sale," he'd say, the same way his father and grandfather had said before him. He thought that would be the end of it. Then came the letter. It was from the local homeowners association, a group Elijah had never been a part of, stating that the land had been legally transferred to them for community development. The paper claimed his family had abandoned the property, an outright lie, given that Elijah lived there, farmed it, and paid taxes on it. At first, he thought it was a clerical error. But when he went down to the county records office, his worst fear became real. The deed had been changed. His land was no longer under his name. Elijah's heart sank, but his mind sharpened. He demanded to know how this happened. The clerk looked uneasy and muttered something about a quiet title action, a legal maneuver often used to resolve disputed ownership. But in Elijah's case, there was no dispute. The HOA had filed papers claiming they couldn't locate the owners, then convinced a judge to award them the property. They had done it in silence, with no notice sent to him, relying on loopholes and connections to steal the Carter legacy. Within weeks, construction signs appeared. Trucks rolled in, cutting into the land where Elijah had buried his parents. They bulldozed pecan trees his grandfather planted and marked the soil for future luxury homes. Elijah would stand at the edge of the property line, fists clenched, watching strangers treat his heritage like a commodity. Friends told him to let it go. "You can't fight the system, man. They've got money, lawyers, influence." But Elijah wasn't just fighting for acres. He was fighting for every black family who had ever been cheated out of what was rightfully theirs. He began to dig into legal documents, into county records, into the HOA's financial statements. What he found made his blood run cold. This wasn't the first time they had done it. The HOA had a quiet pattern, targeting black-owned land in rural areas, filing claims of abandonment, and selling the land to developers. They counted on owners not having the resources to fight back. And in most cases, they were right. But Elijah was different. He reached out to lawyers, journalists, activists, anyone who would listen. Many doors closed in his face, but eventually he found an attorney named Monica Harris, a black woman who had spent her career exposing property theft and racial land grabs. She listened to his story, looked at the paperwork, and said, "Elijah, they picked the wrong man." For months, Elijah and Monica built a case. They found witnesses, tracked emails, and unearthed fraudulent signatures. Elijah's quiet. Farm became a war room. He worked the fields by day, pored over evidence by night. He stopped sleeping full nights, driven by the thought that every day lost meant another piece of his land was destroyed. When the case finally went to court, Elijah wore his father's old Sunday suit. The HOA representatives came in smug, armed, with high-priced lawyers who spoke in polished legal jargon. But Monica dismantled their arguments piece by piece, revealing inconsistencies, false statements, and the racial targeting behind their actions. The room grew tense. The judge leaned forward, and when the gavel finally came down, the verdict hit like thunder. Elijah Carter was the rightful owner of the 1,500 acres. The courtroom erupted. Some cried. Some sat in stunned silence. Elijah simply nodded, relief washing over him. But victory wasn't enough. As he walked out looking over at the HOA members who had tried to erase him, he felt something deeper than relief. He felt resolved, because Elijah knew something they didn't. In the months of fighting them, he had uncovered something else, a legal loophole in their community bylaws, one that gave him a weapon they never saw coming. The loophole was buried deep in the HOA's founding documents. If a property owner within the HOA boundaries acquired a certain percentage of the community's housing units, they would have voting power to dissolve the association entirely. The irony? That clause was written decades ago to protect wealthy developers, never imagining someone like Elijah would use it against them. While fighting for his land in court, Elijah had quietly bought up homes in the HOA's neighborhood. Not directly. He used trusted friends and family members as buyers, purchasing from frustrated residents tired of high fees and oppressive rules. Over time, he gained control of just enough properties to trigger the clause. The day after reclaiming his land, Elijah called an emergency HOA meeting. The board members sat around a long mahogany table, their usual air of superiority still intact. They expected him to come and negotiate, maybe even beg for peace. Instead, he placed a thick binder of deeds on the table and said, "Gentlemen and ladies, I believe these properties give me majority control." The room went silent. He explained, in calm, deliberate words, that under their own rules, he now had the power to vote on the future of the HOA. And his vote was simple. Dissolve it. Permanently. No more fees, no more board, no more authority. To target and steal from families like his. When they tried to protest, he pulled out the signed legal opinion from his attorney, confirming his right to do so. The board members looked at each other, pale and speechless. The vote was swift. The HOA was gone. The very structure that had been stolen from him was dismantled by the man they had tried to erase. Word spread fast. Neighbors who had suffered under the HOA's tyranny celebrated. Families cheered in their driveways. Local news stations ran the story, calling it the ultimate reversal of power. But for Elijah, it wasn't about headlines. It was about justice. He took the profits from selling some of the HOA-owned properties and reinvested them into the community, building a youth center, funding scholarships, and creating a legal aid fund for other black landowners fighting similar battles. He knew his fight wasn't unique. Across America, countless families, especially black families, had lost land to predatory tactics and systemic injustice. The Carter farm became more than a home again. It became a symbol. Schools brought students on field trips to learn about their history. Activists held rallies there, using Elijah's victory as proof that the system could be beaten from within. And every morning Elijah would walk the land, touching the soil, remembering the generations who had kept it alive. Yet even in victory, he carried scars. There were nights when he'd wake up from dreams of bulldozers tearing through the pecan trees. Moments when the sight of a developer's sign would make his stomach tighten. But those moments also reminded him why he fought and why he would keep fighting. Years later, when asked in an interview how he managed to outwit a system built to crush people like him, Elijah smiled and said, "They thought they could take what my family built because they had papers and power. But they didn't understand this land is more than acres. It's blood, it's memory, And memory doesn't die easily. The interviewer asked if he felt any satisfaction in selling the HOA's own homes, turning their greed back on them. Elijah chuckled softly. It wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching them that we're not invisible. We see what's happening. And sometimes, we fight back in ways they can't imagine. And that's exactly what he did. Elijah Carter's story is one of loss, resilience, and a reversal so complete that it still echoes in his community today. It's a reminder that justice isn't always handed down. It's taken, piece by piece, by those who refuse to be erased. And for the families still fighting, his story is a map, a warning, and a promise. The past cannot be stolen if the living refuse to let it go. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't just reclaim what's yours. It's to make sure they can never take it from anyone else again.